The relationship between Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama is an absolutely remarkable testament to interfaith dialogue and mutual respect between two of the world's most revered spiritual leaders. Imagine this, two iconic figures, from entirely different spiritual traditions, coming together time and again, not only leading their own communities but becoming symbols of hope, peace, and moral integrity across the globe. Their multiple meetings and continued dialogue weren't just symbolic, they were a genuine, heartfelt effort to bridge the gap between different faiths. Their commitment to promoting peace and reducing human suffering made a lasting impact on the spiritual landscape of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. It's incredible, isn't it? Let's dive into the fascinating story of how they connected and why their partnership was so inspired by Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama. Subscribe channel for more stories of unity and hope, historical background and context. Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama emerged as major spiritual leaders during a time of significant change and turmoil. Pope John Paul II, born Karol Wojtyla in Poland, became the first non-Italian pope in over 450 years when he was elected in 1978, a real shock to the Church, right? He faced a world divided by the Cold War, with atheistic communism on one side and Western ideologies on the other. John Paul II was known for his vigorous defense of human rights. His support for freedom, and his belief in the inherent dignity of every individual. He traveled extensively, reaching out to people of all faiths, always carrying a message of peace. Meanwhile, Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama, rose to global prominence after fleeing Tibet in 1959 following the Chinese invasion. Living in exile in India, the Dalai Lama worked tirelessly to draw attention to the plight of the Tibetan people, emphasizing non-violence, compassion, and understanding between cultures and religions. He was not just a political figure, he was a spiritual beacon for millions worldwide who admired his unyielding commitment to peace. Can you imagine that strength, leading a nation in exile? And yet maintaining such compassion, these two figures, from vastly different traditions, the Roman Catholic Church and Tibetan Buddhism, were uniquely positioned to engage in a dialogue that crossed cultural, political, and religious boundaries. Both of them, advocates of non-violence, champions of human dignity, were unafraid to face oppressive regimes. Isn't it fascinating how their paths aligned during such pivotal moments in history? The meetings, moments of spiritual unity. Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama met at least 6 times between 1980 and 2003, forging a bond that went far beyond simple diplomacy. Their first meeting in 1980 set the tone for future interactions. Both leaders expressed deep appreciation for each other's work towards peace and human rights. Their meetings weren't just symbolic, they were full of warmth and mutual admiration. Imagine the Pope and the Dalai Lama sitting across from each other, different robes, different languages, yet the same message of hope. One of the most notable meetings took place in 1986 in Assisi, Italy, during the World Day of Prayer for Peace. Pope John Paul II organized this historic event and invited leaders from various religious traditions, including the Dalai Lama, to come together and pray for peace. Can you picture that? Leaders from all over the world, different faiths, side by side. It was a powerful image of unity that deeply resonated with people globally, throughout these meetings. They discussed topics like the role of religion in promoting peace, the importance of spiritual values in a rapidly secularizing world, and the moral responsibilities of leaders. Despite the doctrinal differences, they focused on what brought them together: compassion, justice, human dignity, and the belief that true societal change starts from within. Mutual respect and admiration. You could almost feel the mutual respect whenever Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama were together. The Pope admired the Dalai Lama's tireless advocacy for his people and his unwavering commitment to non-violence, even when faced with tremendous pressure. He often spoke of the Dalai Lama as a courageous advocate for peace, a beacon of hope for the oppressed. Doesn't that say so much about the Dalai Lama's character? For his part, the Dalai Lama had immense admiration for Pope John Paul II's moral leadership. He appreciated the Pope's genuine outreach to other religions, his sincere desire for dialogue, and his effort to heal historical wounds. These qualities, as the Dalai Lama often noted, were rare and invaluable. They both saw their roles not just as spiritual leaders but as moral guides, inspiring their followers to live with compassion and integrity. Isn't that a beautiful legacy? The importance of interfaith dialogue. Their relationship highlighted the importance of interfaith dialogue. Pope John Paul II was a strong advocate for reaching out beyond the confines of the Catholic Church. His numerous meetings with representatives from Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, they all stemmed from his belief that dialogue could foster peace. The Dalai Lama shared this vision, frequently emphasizing the need for all religions to come together. Their commitment was not just theoretical, it was practical. They wanted to create common ground to address real problems: conflict, poverty, human misunderstanding. Do you think this kind of interfaith collaboration could solve our issues today? Their public appearances, like the 1986 gathering in Assisi, showed that religion doesn't have to be a source of division, it can be a source of unity. Isn't that something we desperately need today? Shared commitment to human rights and peace. Both Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama shared an unwavering commitment to human rights and world peace. They knew firsthand what it meant to live through times of immense suffering, the Pope under the shadow of Nazism and communism, the Dalai Lama under the Chinese occupation of Tibet. Their experiences shaped their dedication to human dignity and their refusal to bow to oppression. Pope John Paul II often spoke out against totalitarianism and worked to support those suffering under oppressive regimes. He called for peace and human rights in his messages to the United Nations. Meanwhile, the Dalai Lama's approach was always centered on nonviolence, even earning him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989. Isn't it incredible how both these leaders faced such adversity yet remained unyielding in their commitment to peace? They both believed that real peace begins within, with love, compassion, forgiveness, and humility. Their words and actions were not empty, they genuinely lived by these ideals. Isn't that the kind of leadership we all long for? Legacy of collaboration and hope. The legacy of Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama. It's a legacy of hope, respect, and understanding. In a world full of divisions, their example stands as a reminder of what's possible when we focus on what unites us instead of what divides us. Their meetings inspired countless others to pursue interfaith dialogue. They showed us that unity within diversity is not a utopian dream but a real, achievable goal. The Dalai Lama has often spoken of Pope John Paul II with great fondness, praising his efforts for interfaith understanding. And Pope John Paul II's initiatives have been carried on by his successors, continuing the legacy of collaboration they started together. Isn't it amazing to see how their work is still bearing fruit today? Extended reflections on their meetings and dialogue. To truly appreciate the depth of the relationship between Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama, it's essential to look deeper into the contexts and nuances of each of their encounters. Their first meeting in 1980 was held in an atmosphere of curiosity and mutual respect. Both men, representing such distinct faith traditions, understood the importance of symbolizing unity for the broader world. It wasn't just about pleasantries, it was about planting the seeds of genuine understanding. Imagine that first handshake, filled with the unspoken promise of working together for humanity's greater good. Their subsequent meetings built upon that foundation, each one layered with increased mutual understanding and common purpose. In 1986, during the World Day of Prayer for Peace in Assisi, Pope John Paul II made a bold statement by inviting the Dalai Lama along with representatives of many other world religions. This was more than just an event, it was a declaration to the world that people of different beliefs could and should come together to foster peace. This was revolutionary, especially given the tensions between various religions at that time. It must have taken immense courage for Pope John Paul II to stand by such a message, especially during the Cold War era, when ideologies were in stark conflict. During each of these meetings, they touched upon deep issues: the role of spirituality in a modernizing world, the importance of upholding human dignity in the face of consumerism, and the moral duties of global leaders. Can you imagine the gravity of such discussions? Two leaders, whose words carried the weight of millions of believers, grappling with the urgent issues of their time. Their conversations were not just for the cameras, they were genuine engagements aimed at finding ways that their communities could contribute to a more harmonious world. Spiritual leadership in times of crisis. What makes their relationship even more compelling is how they embodied spiritual leadership during some of the darkest times in recent history. Pope John Paul II faced in Eastern Europe under the iron grip of Soviet influence. His election as pope was seen as a symbol of hope, particularly for those living under communist regimes. His moral authority played a significant role in the eventual fall of communism in Eastern Europe, particularly in his native Poland. He was a beacon for those who believed that faith and freedom were inextricably linked. On the other hand, the Dalai Lama faced the harsh reality of exile after the Chinese invasion of Tibet. Leading his people from a foreign land, the Dalai Lama used his voice not just to advocate for Tibetans but also to promote the ideals of nonviolence and compassion globally. Even when facing enormous pressure, he remained committed to peace. Imagine being uprooted from your homeland, yet consistently choosing compassion over anger. That takes a profound level of spiritual maturity. Their leadership was not just in words but in actions. Pope John Paul II's visits to countries suffering from violence, poverty, and injustice were powerful gestures of solidarity. Similarly, the Dalai Lama's global tours to promote Tibetan culture and values were more than mere advocacy, they were a testament to his belief in the power of dialogue and the human spirit. The way these leaders approached the crises they faced showed the world that resilience paired with compassion could indeed make a difference. Their approach to modern challenges. The late 20th century was a period of great change. Technological advances, globalization, and shifting political landscapes redefined how people lived and interacted. Both Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama understood the importance of spirituality in navigating this changing world. They spoke frequently about the dangers of materialism, the loss of community, and the erosion of traditional values. In a world that was increasingly focused on economic growth and individual success, they were voices reminding humanity of the need for compassion, community, and a sense of higher purpose. Pope John Paul II often emphasized the value of human dignity amidst these modern challenges. He argued that the pursuit of economic growth should never come at the cost of human rights or the welfare of the most vulnerable. His encyclicals, such as Centesimus Annus, reflected his concern about the excesses of capitalism and the neglect of social justice. He was not against progress, but he believed that it had to be coupled with ethical considerations. The Dalai Lama, too, addressed these modern issues with a focus on the individual's inner life. He often spoke about the need for inner transformation as a way to cope with external challenges. His teachings on mindfulness and compassion resonated deeply with people from all walks of life, including those outside the Buddhist faith. In a fast-paced world, his message about slowing down, reflecting, and cultivating inner peace found a receptive audience. His emphasis on universal values, kindness, empathy, and interdependence, provided a moral compass for navigating the complexities of modern life. Bridging the East and West. One of the most compelling aspects of the relationship between Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama was how they bridged the gap between Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. The Pope, representing a faith deeply rooted in Western thought and tradition, and the Dalai Lama, embodying the spiritual practices of the East, found a remarkable synergy in their beliefs. This was not a superficial alignment, it was a profound meeting of minds and hearts, centered on shared values like compassion, justice, and peace. Their dialogue showed the world that while theological differences exist, there are deeper truths that transcend cultural and doctrinal boundaries. The Pope's interest in Eastern spirituality was evident in his writings and speeches, where he often spoke about the value of meditation and contemplation, practices central to Buddhist teachings. The Dalai Lama, likewise, has always shown respect for the Christian faith, often highlighting the figure of Jesus Christ as an example of compassion and selflessness. By coming together, they offered a powerful counter-narrative to the idea of a clash of civilizations. Instead of conflict, they demonstrated collaboration. Instead of fear of the other, they showed curiosity and respect. Imagine if more leaders today could emulate this spirit. What kind of world might we be able to create? The power of symbolic actions. The meetings between Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama were not just significant because of the words exchanged but also because of the symbolic actions they took. One such symbolic gesture was their decision to pray together. Prayer, in most religious contexts, is an intimate and sacred act, and for leaders from two different faiths to come together in prayer was a profound statement about unity. It was a declaration that despite their differences, they were united in their hope for peace. The 1986 World Day of Prayer for Peace in Assisi was perhaps the most powerful of these moments. The image of the Dalai Lama and Pope John Paul II, alongside leaders from many other religious traditions, praying together in the spirit of peace, became a symbol of what interfaith cooperation could look like. It was a visual representation of unity, and it sent a powerful message that cooperation and mutual respect were not just ideals but practical realities that could be embodied. These symbolic actions went beyond mere gestures. They had a ripple effect, inspiring countless others around the world to engage in interfaith dialogue. Religious leaders who might have otherwise remained within the confines of their traditions were encouraged to reach out and collaborate. It showed the world that interfaith engagement wasn't about compromising one's beliefs but about enriching them through understanding and respect for others. Challenges and criticisms. Despite the overwhelmingly positive impact of their relationship, Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama did face criticisms from within their own communities. There were those within the Catholic Church who were uncomfortable with the Pope's openness to other religions. Some felt that his willingness to engage in dialogue could be interpreted as compromising the uniqueness of the Catholic faith. However, Pope John Paul II was steadfast in his belief that genuine dialogue did not mean diluting one's beliefs but rather affirming them while respecting others. Similarly, the Dalai Lama faced criticism, particularly from those who believed that engaging with leaders of other faiths might undermine the Tibetan struggle for autonomy. There were concerns that his message of universal compassion might be seen as too conciliatory in the face of political oppression. Yet, the Dalai Lama remained committed to his belief that compassion and dialogue were the most powerful tools for change. These criticisms highlight the courage it took for both leaders to pursue the path of dialogue. They understood that real leadership often involves going against the tide and standing up for what one believes to be right, even in the face of opposition. Their ability to stay true to their values, despite the criticisms, is a testament to their spiritual strength and their deep commitment to the well-being of humanity. The broader impact of their dialogue. The relationship between Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama had a significant impact beyond their personal interactions. It helped pave the way for greater acceptance of interfaith dialogue as an essential aspect of spiritual and social life. Their meetings were watched by millions around the world, and they inspired a new generation of leaders, both religious and secular, to think about how they could collaborate for the common good. Their dialogue also influenced how religious education was approached in many parts of the world. Schools and institutions that had previously focused solely on their own religious teachings began to incorporate broader perspectives, recognizing the value of learning about other traditions. The example set by Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama showed that understanding other faiths did not weaken one's own beliefs but rather strengthened them by fostering empathy and a broader understanding of humanity. Furthermore, their relationship set the stage for initiatives aimed at global peace and justice. Interfaith councils, peace initiatives, and humanitarian efforts have all drawn inspiration from the examples set by these two leaders. Their ability to connect on a human level, beyond doctrine and dogma, showed that collaboration was not only possible but essential for addressing the world's most pressing challenges. Lessons for today's world. In today's increasingly polarized world, the relationship between Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama offers valuable lessons. At a time when differences are often emphasized over commonalities, their example reminds us of the importance of focusing on what unites us. They showed that genuine dialogue requires humility, the willingness to listen, and a deep respect for the other. Their relationship also highlights the importance of moral leadership. Both leaders were willing to take risks and stand up for what they believed in, even when it was unpopular. In an era where leaders often prioritize political expediency over moral clarity, their example serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of integrity and courage. Perhaps most importantly, they taught us that peace begins with the individual. Both Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama emphasized the importance of inner transformation as a foundation for societal change. In a world that often looks for quick fixes to complex problems, their message that true peace starts from within is as relevant today as it ever was. Conclusion: a vision for a harmonious future. The relationship between Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama was a beautiful example of what is possible when we rise above our differences and focus on our shared humanity. They demonstrated that while our beliefs may vary, our values often overlap, and it is within this overlap that we can find the potential for true collaboration and peace. Their story is a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of respect, empathy, and dialogue. In today's polarized world, isn't their example exactly what we need? They remind us that the path forward is through dialogue, compassion, and respect. Ultimately, their partnership showed us that the greatest leaders build bridges, not walls. And through their commitment to peace, they've inspired so many to believe in a better, more compassionate world, a world where all people, regardless of faith or background, can live in harmony and work together for the common good. So, what do you think? Could their example be the key to solving some of today's most pressing issues? Let's take inspiration from them and see where we can bring a little more peace and understanding into our own lives. Imagine if every leader, every community, and every individual could take even a fraction of the inspiration from Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama's relationship. Imagine the walls we could tear down, the bridges we could build, and the lives we could change. Their story is not just history, it's a call to action for all of us, here and now.